Thank you so much for being here on this podcast. I'm so excited because we connected online and I saw your background like, you have like so much involvement outside of your work that I clearly want to talk about. So for example, your involvement with Program Your Future, which if you stay until the end of the podcast episode, you'll definitely hear about that. So first off, can you kind of give us a short introduction about yourself, your background, interests, or hobbies?
Yeah. So thank you for having me here, first of all. And I've been following your podcast and I love it. And I think this is such an awesome initiative that you're doing. My name is Alankrita Dayal, and I currently work at Program Your Future, where I lead the development of our web-based educational technologies, including virtual reality course materials and tailored robot building and programming games that are utilizing a lot of high-tech technology, including machine learning algorithms, artificial intelligence, and gamification for creating a personalized and engaging learning experience that's going to spark our students' interest into STEM careers. And so the initiatives that I work on are directly exposing disadvantaged youth, including young women, first generation students, youth from underrepresented backgrounds, youth with disabilities, and youth who are low-income refugees and migrants, to role models that look like them, and also, directly equipping them with the rigorous practice and knowledge that they need for becoming high achievers in their STEM subjects, both at school and in their internships, which in turn has actually helped stop that leaky pipeline that we generally see for underrepresented minorities. And it's also helped promoted positive self-perceptions and retention in the field, which is really important when it comes to students from, marginalized backgrounds. So for me personally, my interest in technology actually goes way back to my childhood days. And I remember growing up, I was just mesmerized by how much technology was positively impacting our lives. When I was born, I actually had neonatal chronic health conditions. And the only reason that I was able to survive literally was through intravenous oxygen and phototherapy
Oh,
technology.
wow.
And then in elementary school and middle school, whenever my asthma would flare up, it was that programming behind the nebulizer that actually helped me breathe. And so, from a very young age, I developed that passion that I wanted to take a look at, what is research and what is engineering, because I always had that inspiration from the work that other scientists did. And when they produce these kinds of equipments, and then that wanted me to feel like I want to study engineering too.
Wow, that is definitely amazing. That is such a cool story of why you got into technology in the first place. Mine is definitely not like that. Mine was like, oh, I just like technology.
Yeah, actually, like even apart from the medical aspect of it, later when I started playing around with remote control toys, video games, walkie talkies, those were a thing back then, and cell phones. And then I started using, emailing, texting, also video conferencing, and all the social networking. That's when I was like, wow, this is so amazing how things like entertainment are also brought right to our fingertips. And
Yeah.
all of these gadgets connect us all to the whole world. So that's what really intrigued me about all these technological advancements, and how they're really leading to this kind of widespread communication and connection and just all this information out there. So there's really this huge potential on how each of us, especially in this technology driven world, can really take a grasp on that, and also be a part of making that making our humanity into this next level state from what it is right now. And I think that's the amazing part of technology and being part of it.
All right, so we're gonna dive into your career, side hustle, and a little bit more about technology, machine learning, and AI that you've been working on. So first off, I like to kind of ask this to every podcast guest that I have. So if you had all the time in the world, what would you be doing?
Yeah, if I had all the time in the world, I would be pursuing my passion, which is literally researching. So I just love researching different communities. And so actually, during my undergrad, I studied at UC Berkeley. I not only majored in computer science, but I also ended up doing a double major in cognitive science and also minors in public policy and South Asian studies. And the reason was because I have this deep passion on just understanding understanding different populations and then looking at ways where we can actually insert technology as a solution to the different kinds of needs out there. So definitely, if I had all the time in the world, that's what you would be finding me doing. I can do it, in the weekends, in my free time. I just am mesmerized.
So are you basically saying like you would be doing Program Your Future for full time then, as kind of like what you would be doing?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's so important. There's so many, when we as engineers work on projects, it's really important to have, a diverse team working on it, because our end users aren't just, one group of people.
Yeah.
There's users who are new to the technology. There's users from different age levels. There's users from different countries, all of that. So the more diverse the team, the better it is. And the more, diverse your engineers are, and the more open the field is, the more ideas that can come out of it, and the more difference we can make for all of our world as a community.
Okay, so this is where I thought it was a little bit interesting, because you come from like a UX background, but also an engineering background. So as an engineer, all you do is just code, right? And then you work with designers who are mostly working with users and trying to build that process and keep that end user in mind. So on the engineer aspect, do they also do that? Do they work hand in hand, or are they just mostly doing the code that they want you to do?
Yeah, so UX engineering is actually a really interesting field, because it overlaps both the research side of it and the programming and the actual building aspect of it. So that's the sort of beauty of this role. So when you think of, simply user experience design, it's sort of about the process that, designers take to create products that are actually meaningful and relevant for the experience of users. And then when you bridge that in with the engineering, you can translate that design into actual actionable features that the engineers can then build out. So in my role in both a researching and designing capability, as well as the leadership role in sort of guiding the engineers and programmers, I'm able to sort of take a lead on that whole design process, where we're able to acquire data, analyze it to see what kind of insights we can take, and what are actually useful features. Because a lot of us, as engineers, we might have assumptions that, hey, this is a nice feature to have, but is it actually a nice feature to have? That's what we want to make sure before we start the programming aspect of it. And then similarly, a lot of times engineers, we can get blockheaded and we can say, okay, this is so easy, this new feature that we rolled out, but for a user, especially a user with not much of a technical background, it might not be an easy feature to adjust to. So that's where UX comes into play, into that engineering process, to make sure, okay, we have this new feature, but are we deploying it in a way that's actually going to be understandable and easily adaptable to the user? So that's sort of where I come into play in my role as a UX design engineering lead.
I think like what comes to mind for me is I don't know if you watched the show Silicon Valley.
Oh yeah, I have.
You probably know what scene I'm talking about, where they're just like, wait, this works, this is amazing, and then how come no one likes it, no one understands it? And it was just, this is like what came to mind when you said that.
Yeah, actually a great example that I use in PUF. So at PUF, we have a product management and design academy, and when we're starting with these kinds of concepts and trying to instill values that, okay, design is so important, no, don't just dive into building the product, we try to bring up this example of eating and healthy choices. So this is something I think everyone can relate with, because a lot of us, for a variety of reasons, we can stop and just, not eat healthy. So the example I like to tell my students is, imagine if you have an older sister who is not eating healthy. Well, what are you going to do about it? And how are you going to find out more information on why she's ordering takeout every day? So there's a bunch of reasons, right? But you want to take a really scientific methodology approach to it. So first you could ask, well, why does she order takeout every day? It could be her fridge and cupboards are empty, but then, that's not really a reason why she's ordering takeout. The reason, then you have to sort of dive deeper and say, okay, well, why are the fridge and cupboards empty? It might be because she hasn't been able to go grocery shopping for over a week. So now you can see we're getting closer to that. What was that original cause for not being able to eat healthy? And then so, as a as a researcher with your hat on, you could be like, okay, well, why is she not going grocery shopping? And that's where you see, okay, she doesn't have time to go to the supermarket, for example. And then you can even get even into, a little bit more detail, and you could ask your potential user, like, why don't you have time? And it could be, your sister is studying all the time or working long hours, and that's why she's exhausted. So as a design engineer, it's important to identify that exact root cause and not just make, assumptions. So doing all this interviewing and surveying to figure out that root cause in this case was, a lack of time. And so the solution might be focusing on efficiency and convenience for your user. Like, how can you make a quick and convenient solution to eating healthy for college students, something like that. Now, if you reached a wrong root cause, so for example, if you just stopped at that cupboard point, you saw the cupboards were empty, you might have come up with a completely wrong solution. You might have said, let's find a way to, just get a robotic machine and throw some food into the cupboard or something like that, right? That's not really addressing the main point where the user didn't have time. So that's why, this is a really fascinating field. I feel like it's very unique compared to other kind of tech roles, because you get to see that, what was that actual need that caused you to think, okay, we need some kind of solution here, rather than just jumping directly into programming or jumping into directly putting the product out or something like that.
This is pretty interesting. And I remember talking to another UX designer that I had on my podcast, Derek May, actually, on the difference between UX research and market research, because it seems pretty similar. I think the main difference is that in marketing, they're already targeting a particular product or the business in general to a particular demographic. But it looks like the way that UX designers or researchers are focusing on is like, okay, let's kind of dive deeper in this persona, in this particular area, on what their kind of needs and what their wants and what makes them tick, and then catering that service to them. Is that like how it would work?
Yeah, so that's actually a really great question, because both roles have the name designers in it, right? Or researchers. So market designers or market researchers versus UX designers and UX researchers. They both have that similar name, but it's actually two separate roles, and they go hand in hand in a way. So UX designers are directly, more focused during the product's development. So you might see a UX designer come in when you're just at that ideation stage and thinking about, what is the product we want to build? What are its key performance indicators? What do we want to do? Then the UX designer might also come in when it comes to actually testing the product once it's built out and seeing, how can we improve it? Is it going as we predicted? So a UX design really fits in all parts of this stage. Now, with a market researcher, the market researcher is more focused on the external aspect of things. So doing, competitive analysis to see what does this product fit in that industry that you're working with. And a market researcher would also be in charge of thinking about what is the most optimal go-to-market strategy. So thinking about now that we have a product, but how are we going to actually present it out to the world? How are we going to say, hey, we have this product here ready to go? Who are we going to partner with? It's more of an external facing role, whereas UX design is really goes hand in hand with actually developing the product. Now, both of them do have some overlap in the sense where they're both looking at data and thinking about, what are some insights that could drive the creation of the product. So both are giving that insight. So there may be some overlap, and you're always, talking and having these overlapping meetings to sort of share those different insights. But, for the UX person, they'd really want to be focusing on what is a good experience to meet that particular user's need in the specific context of actually using the product, whereas that product marketer or researcher would be thinking, okay, how is this developed product going to be fitting into our target demographic and being actually used by them.
Okay, sounds good. So I'm so fascinated with your journey, because I'm like, I've never even heard of UX research. Oh, no, I've definitely heard of that. I've talked about UX engineer. I've never heard of that before this. I was like UX designer or UX research, but nothing for UX engineering. So can you tell us, like, how did you get to this point? What's your career journey?
Yeah. So as I mentioned before, I was always fascinated. And so that's basically when I was little, I thought, I'm just in love with science and math. And so from then on, I started trying to find ways that I could dabble into engineering research myself. And as a high schooler, I remember pushing myself to join the local robotics team and ultimately going on to the national championships too. Then I headed down to UC Santa Barbara for research, and I had a great opportunity where I could work with a lab to determine the effects of prenatal stress. So that's the stress that comes to mothers when they're still pregnant on their child's potential of becoming a cocaine addict. And we used mice in this research. So I was able to see, wow, okay, these kind of health overlap with technology once again. Then I had a chance to head over to UCSF to analyze kyphometer readings, which are readings used to determine the angle of curvature for elderly when their spine starts to curve in hyperkyphosis. And then also try to look at ways that we could give exercise interventions to help alleviate that pain and help, improve that kyphosis angle as well. Then still as a high schooler, I also had a chance to head over to UC Berkeley for developing and testing a new robotic hand for amputees. And so what excited me the most from all of these experiences was just that variety of ways that technology had the power to transform the lives of everyone around the world, regardless of whether they were literate or not, rich or poor, ill or healthy, or adult or infant, right? It didn't really matter because technology could be a solution. And now that I'm in the industry, I wake up every day even more excited because I now have that privilege to apply my technical background towards, finding solutions to these hardships that are around me and empowering others to do the same too. In the past few years, I've worked in many technical and leadership roles, and in each project, it's been really exciting and rewarding, not only, strengthening my own hardware and software skills, but also helping others to pursue and persist in their technical careers and their journeys through the advocacy efforts that I've done. So, for example, in the past, I've been a racial equity fellow at Net Impact, where I had the chance to foster a palpable community discussion across the United States about the issues of race, class, and culture that often hinder the learning process, and even in progressive learning environments such as that in the Bay Area. Because if you're a community leader and you leave these issues, unattended, then that can be a problem, right? Even if you're in a privileged area. So then later on within my university's College of Engineering and School of Public Health, I also decided to be a part of a select cohort of technology and wellness Fung Fellows. That's what our names was. And we leveraged technology to design and implement human-centered sustainability solutions that were at the intersection of health and tech for different communities, including, teens, veterans, and the elderly. And so that's where, even though I had an engineering background, I really started thinking about, okay, our community is not just one community, there's different parts of it, there's diversity in it, and we need to be able to build products that are for everyone. And, during this time for over 5 years, I also served as the board director for our cooperative for students at Berkeley, and also president of our student co-op. So that allowed me a chance to really voice policies and programs that can benefit diverse first-generation migrant students, because I'm a first-generation migrant myself, and I think there's so many challenges with it. My parents didn't know what colleges were like here in the U.S. I didn't have that kind of support system. I didn't have any role models, and so I know that difficulty, and I really want to make sure others who are in a similar boat are able to have a way to feel comfortable in the places that they're studying, living, working, and growing. Then one summer, I was recruited by the vice president at HP Enterprises. I then led the development of the user interface and experience of our cutting edge e-learning platform. And before that, when I studied at undergrad, as I mentioned, I studied this kind of interdisciplinary field. I also tried to join clubs. And so this would be my recommendation for anyone who's, in undergrad or in high school and thinking about college. I would recommend, think about what kind of clubs are in your community and try to join them to, grow yourself and grow out your skills. I remember I joined the robotics club, and I ended up actually being selected as the vice president for it later on too, for robotics at Berkeley. And that allowed me a chance to design different kinds of products, including this mind-controlled massager, actually, that was able to, real-time adjust its soothing patterns on your brain, depending on, what was the user's current mood. So as you can imagine, a lot of artificial intelligence and machine learning was part of that. And then, within my department of electrical engineering, I also innovated a magnetic particle sensor for biomedical applications. So for example, you might have heard in the news that Google is trying to create these nanobots that can deliver targeted drugs to your different parts of your body. And so this kind of sensor could help determine, what is the position of that nanobot inside you. For example. Then I also had a chance to, work in more fitness-oriented environments. So still overlapping with technology. So at my university again, I worked on building a multimodal human action database system. So that involved creating this motion capture system that used different multi-baseline stereo cameras around the subject that were placed at different angles, and depth sensors, accelerometers, and microphones, so that the data that we collected about human motion and recognition could then be translated into a model that could be used by researchers, by people such as people who create Xbox games and things like that, so that they could create more accurate body part movement recognitions and estimations, and so that they could animate more accurately. So there's that interdisciplinary aspect of technology that it's not just those big four companies out there. There's animation and other places like that that you can also go to. And I also had a chance to do internships too. So I've worked at Bank of America, I worked at Blue Goji Fitness Games, the International Computer Science Institute, and the National Institutes of Health as well. And while working on these projects, I really was able to see, wow, what happens when you have, just a concept in your brain, and how can you actually take steps to make sure it's ready for deployment. And so I think that's the critical part of UX. And I think a lot of times when folks are just narrowed in just learning how to program in Java or C++, they're not able to see that kind of interaction that is very necessary when it comes to creating a really viable product. So I think it's really important for folks to focus on that. I know actually one more experience. I worked at UCSF Neurology, and with my team, we founded a system called BrainWalk, which was a comprehensive and rapid neurodegeneration diagnosis system. And actually, surprisingly, when it comes to things like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease, there's not really a coherent way for doctors to diagnose these kinds of procedures. So thankfully, there's teams at UCSF who are working on that. There's teams who are working on how to make even events more engaging and how to make ticketing more engaging. There's teams who are making that billing system between hospitals and patients more efficient. And so when you get to work on these kinds of projects, I think you automatically get to appreciate that, wow, you can integrate so much knowledge across so many different areas. And and see firsthand that how can you understand your consumers' behaviors, and then also get a better understanding of how to work in team-oriented environments and how to meet user experience planned goals. And so as in both as an engineer and a person who's working in UX too, I really enjoy that aspect of designing strategies that meet customer demands, and then also creating user behavior models, and identifying those kinds of constraints that you need to address when you're actually implementing the new technologies and actually creating, the specs that, okay, this is the engineering team has to work on next. And so now at PUF, I also have that opportunity to advocate for diversity, which I really love, and, really embrace and promote it among all the different groups, especially those who are most underrepresented, so that our efforts as a whole are able to drive more greater innovation for our future and, more equity for our environment. So that's what really drives me to do it. And I think that's the power I see for being, a UX design engineer.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that was definitely a journey. And you did definitely mention PUF, and I just kind of want to learn about that a little bit more. So can you tell us, what does Program Your Future come from about? Like, what was the story behind that? How did you do it? Maybe if there was even like particular testimonies or success stories that have come out of it.
Yeah. So I have this like deep passion about the power of diversity. And so while working at PUF, I'm always excited because I get to work on projects that bring together, these diverse ranges of population. So these projects that I work on, they're leveraging not only the power of technology, but also that power of public dialogue, so that we can, educate minds and open up everyone's hearts, so that, together we can all tap into that deep human communication that we share. And I get to apply the technical skills in researching the needs for users and then designing that sleek and well-rounded platform experiences. Then I also get to, use human-centered design and research principles to amplify that creativity that's already in our communities while we're solving these, racial, disability, and gender equity problems. And I think I really feel that everyone deserves that sense of acceptance in the places where we are. And so that's what my hope is when I create technology at PUF. Now, growing up, no one in my family had ever ventured into technology before. And because we were new to the country, for me personally too, it was really difficult to find mentors, have my voice heard, or, even feel welcomed in STEM and computer science. And so my first time learning computer science and programming was actually only in my senior year as a high schooler. And user experience design was only something I later learned, way later in college, through internships in the industry. And so going back to high school, I remember when I walked into my first day of AP computer science and I saw only one other girl in a class of 35 students. And then, once I got into college electrical engineering courses, this figure didn't really change much. And almost all students, TAs, and, all the professors too, they were all male. And so it's so relatable, right? And so I also found that most people were already familiar with these engineering topics for many years, unlike me, and whereas I was just getting started. And so it definitely didn't help, being, the only female and the only immigrant student in most of my sections. And so actually over time, this started, building up. And I also started to notice that, female peers were dropping out of the major, especially as it came to, higher upper division courses. But, after all these hurdles, I still decided to persevere. And it was by defying that status quo, and I think having this kind of, passion, that I was able to pursue and finish my studies. And so I chose to supplement my computer science education with, cognitive science and public policy and South Asian studies, was so that I could learn more about the needs of different communities and how technology can be used to uplift these kinds of diverse individuals. And I wanted to do that because I wanted to make sure we're solving that, that big, bold problem of racial, gender, and socioeconomic equity. And that's when and with that vision, that's when I launched the initiatives that we have at Program Your Future, so that, there is this kind of platform out there for social good that is focused directly on educating and empowering, underrepresented at-risk youth. And after many years, my team and I have actually grown the initiative into a internationally recognized organization that's educating and empowering over 20,000 underrepresented youth for success in their higher education and STEM careers. Our partners include President Bill Clinton, the National Center for Women in IT, and the United Nations too, where actually since April of this year, we've also been delegated as the North America focal point for their UN group for children and youth. So I think all in all, in what I do is when I'm working at PUF, is I want to create those academies, those programs, those live instructor-led, academies where students can, really meet with actual professors and industry experts to learn on how they can, prepare for tests, how they can be industry ready and be internship ready, so that they can actually feel confident that, okay, yes, I belong in this field. Yes, I can, complete my studies and all of that. And so I really see myself continuing to work in this kind of developing these kinds of solutions. And I think I can share, one story of this young girl. Actually, her name was Yasmin, and I met her not that long ago. She was in middle school, and she's also from a first generation and low income migrant family. And she told me that she really wanted to explore the tech field, but because she saw no one like herself, it really, she told me she felt she was outside of that bubble and she couldn't succeed. But, like this girl, there's just so many other girls out there too who might have that kind of aspiration, but they don't end up pursuing those dreams because they become so discouraged by feeling that same way. And I think for me, I see this as a problem that girls, people of color, disabled students, and all of these other underrepresented populations, they're not fitting that tech stereotype, and that's why they're being pushed out. And this could be as a result of several contributing conditions. It could be discouragement, that fear, just the lack of resources and a lack of guidance and confidence. And so in the United States, especially just from preschool to high school, underrepresented students are disproportionately lacking access to high quality experiences compared to their peers, and especially role models to develop their interest in computing and in computer science courses to prepare for college. And so through Program Your Future, my vision has been to, actively change that tech stereotype by, educating and empowering as many youth as possible in a way that's promoting diversity and equity, and also, community building, so that we can all drive greater innovation. So alongside, boot camps, after school programs, and academies, we have also developed these educational technologies that can be accessed from anywhere around the world to supplement our students' learnings and, monitor their progress in the field longitudinally. It's not just you just enter once and it's over, you're there and you have the support throughout the way until you get to your career stage. And, collectively over these past few years, PUF students have completed over 3 million hours of programming and other STEM related educational activities since the organization was first founded. Now, going back to Yasmin and her journey as one of my students, when I met her, she was just 13 years old, and she was a Syrian refugee. And when we started talking, she told me more about a bit of her background, and she told me her father had actually left her family when she was little, and her mother was now single-handedly raising her, working those night shifts to meet their needs at home. And so at that time, her school, actually, I guess similar to mine, she didn't have the resources, their school didn't have the resources to offer, any kind of hands-on computer science and STEM learning. And her family also didn't have that budget to experience that through expensive outside programs. And so that's when I said, okay, I immediately invited Yasmin to join the after school PUF programs that we were hosting nearby at UC Berkeley. And, to my excitement, she said yes. And, growing up, well, just like me, actually, she hadn't seen role models herself, but through those hands-on activities and those one-on-one mentors we had at PUF, Yasmin was able to, start to witness firsthand what is possible through technology, and she was able to see this through fun ways too. So for example, we have this activity at PUF where we teach Google Earth programming, and students are able to directly lower and rise the sea levels on Google Maps. So they can see, San Francisco is covered with water now, and then they can, program it and say, oh wow, San Francisco doesn't have a bay anymore. And so they can do these kinds of fun things while they're also learning with industry engineers who look like them. And, through this kind of programming that she had in her middle school and also in her high school, she started to become interested in, being part of this field herself, and she decided to pursue higher education. Now, before the pandemic, and this is the really exciting part, while I was hosting another event on campus at UC Berkeley, I ran into Yasmin, and she told me that PUF was her turning point in molding her academic and career aspirations. And she was really excited to share that she was now a freshman at UC Berkeley in the College of Engineering. Nice. And so at that moment, I felt that, I had reached my biggest accomplishment, as a mentor, as an engineer, as everything. What's amazing is that Yasmin now actually comes back and she mentors younger students at PUF too. So she continues to be part of the community. And I think that's just what I love about PUF and what it stands for all these students out there.
That's definitely an amazing story. And actually, for some reason, I was thinking about this when I was watching this TV show called Mythic Quest, and how there's only
I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, it is it's like a TV show. It's an Apple original, actually, where they have a female software engineer lead, and then everyone else is male. I mean, there's a few women there too. So I was wondering while I was watching, and it never really occurred to me. I always knew there's not a lot of women in STEM field, but why? I never thought about why. And when I started Googling it, and apparently it starts very early in your childhood, where maybe your parents will hand you a Barbie, and then they'll hand the kids, the boys, a game or something with technology, and they already introduced that from the very beginning. And for some reason, just women or girls specifically and technology just don't mesh. So I didn't understand why specifically. Why are there not a lot of people that are specifically women or even just other minorities did not touch technology, or always just felt like they shouldn't go into that area? So do you have any ideas of why?
Yeah, and actually this is from what I've heard even some students say directly to me firsthand. A lot of times, especially women, they're told by their parent figures or other figures in the family that you're just a woman, and the expectation is you're going to grow up, you're going to become this housewife, and you don't really have to do much to really support yourself, and you'll be dependent on the support of someone else. And so that's sort of that mindset that girls are growing up with, that hey, I'm not the one who's supposed to be in tech, and things like that. And then especially for families who have never even ventured into something like technology before, they've only been in other kinds of careers, that student not only will not feel empowered to pursue the field, they cannot even imagine themselves being in that field when none of their uncles, aunts, anyone in their extended family has been in that field in the first place. So that's really a scary point. And then they get this a messaging from others that hey, as a woman you might just become a housewife, or you might just be start looking for other kinds of jobs, or start looking into something that's not tech, just because of the message. And I think that's part of the reason why we need to have more of these conversations, so that and I think it's great because the more conversations we have about this on places like YouTube, for example, the more students can see, because almost everyone, regardless of their background, they have access to a Google search engine or YouTube, and they're able to say, hey, this is something I can belong into, and not just whatever messaging that they might be getting at home or at other places. So there's that. So when we have more of these conversations, when we're able to shape that public narrative, I think students who are from these kinds of marginalized communities, they can also say, hey, we belong here, and we're just as good as anyone else in the field, and become more bold. And I think it's sort of like a double-edged sword. So it's not just those students themselves, but also the more privileged students, they also need to be able to say that, hey, my mentor can be a person of color, my mentor can be a female, I can be working in a team that has, a disabled person, it has a person who is a refugee, all of this, and I can still be a productive part of that team. So those kinds of privileged individuals should also be able to recognize, hey, this is a diverse world. We have all of this energy and potential among different groups, and it's not just for one particular identity. Anyone can be part of the tech field, and anyone can succeed in tech.
Yeah, that definitely was the way I got into technology. It was that my
Mhm.
family was like, no, you're gonna go get married, you're gonna go work at
Oh,
McDonald's. I was like,
yeah.
what? Like of all
Yeah.
places, McDonald's, and then they're gonna say like you're just gonna be a housewife and have kids. But for me, it was like, no, I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna do exactly the opposite, and that's why I got into
Yeah.
technology.
Yeah.
It's not really a good reason, but I ended up liking it anyways because I like technology. But
Yeah.
so it was definitely a driver. When you said that, I was like, oh, that's my family.
Yeah, and it's actually so inspiring to see folks like even from our older generation, for
Hmm.
example, all the women in NASA, they were
Hmm.
probably, just one in like two or three women in their whole
Yeah.
cohort for graduation, because
Hmm.
even back then it was even worse than it is now. But it's just, I'm glad we have this woman power and we're driving for more out there,
Hmm.
definitely.
All right. So for anyone who's interested in helping out program your future or even being a student, how should they get involved if they want to help out or be helped?
Yeah, so there's many ways you can be involved.
Okay.
The first would be, so if you're, elementary school student, middle school student, high schooler, and also undergrad, and graduate, we have
Oh
different
wow.
levels of programs. Yeah, so for the elementary school, middle school, and high school level, we have a lot of STEM focused academies. So it would be including topics such as engineering and programming, as
Hmm.
well as topics such as math, so pre-calculus, algebra, all the levels of math, and then also science, so AP Physics, AP Chemistry, all of that. You can learn that through Program Your Future. Um, and I think having a solid foundation of math and science is really important. So I'd really encourage anyone who's watching this, be involved, be ready to start learning all of this math and science, because it's
Hmm.
applicable to when you get into the industry and when you get into undergrad and grad. Now for undergraduates and graduates, we have similar programs. So we have programs where they can join a product management and design academy, where they can have a 6 month really curated experience where they can practice and build a portfolio that can make them industry ready for either internships or for full-time career roles.
Hmm.
Then we also have we have research teams who are actually developing and improving on the educational technologies we have. And so we have undergraduates and graduates part of those teams, and really using their background in robotics or electrical engineering and
Hmm.
programming to to make an impact. And you don't even need an engineering background to be part of the mission. You could
Hmm.
have something like a humanities background or something
Hmm.
that's educational focused, and that's still really valuable when it comes to the design of a product, because it's not just engineers who are building it,
Yeah.
it's the people who have that idea. And even if it's something like psychology, that's also so important. A psychology student could, for example, be giving input on what are those drivers for human motivation, and how
Yeah.
how can those be translated into technology requirements. So we have those kinds of programs where undergrads and graduates can not only build out their skills, but they're also working directly on technology initiatives that we have here. And then we have for folks who are already STEM professionals, we'd love for them to be part of the community and come as mentors, come as speakers for academies, even teach a session or two. That would be awesome, because all of our students, they're coming from these kinds of backgrounds, and
Hmm.
any exposure is just so valuable. Any kind of connection is so valuable. So I'd recommend, there's a spot for everyone at PUF. So if you're interested in technology, if you have a passion about social good, definitely send us a message. Our email is info@programyourfuture.org. And you can find us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. We're there. So happy to stay connected on that basis. You can follow and see what opportunities are coming up.
Definitely. And all the links will be down below as well. So, lastly, can you tell us like what are you up to lately? What can we support you right now?
Yeah. So at the moment, I think the most urgent way for support would be um, getting the message across, because, in this pandemic world, at the moment, it's been the barrier for accessing STEM education has just widened. So last year when schools started shutting down, we got abundance of messages from parents and students alike saying that, schools had opted to remove the AP classes, their AP offerings. They decided to, limit the kind of instructional support that was given. And so, especially for those kinds of students and communities, it would be awesome to, spread the word and say, there's this option where you can get that kind of instruction and that kind of support for your math and science subjects through the professors and the industry mentors we have at Program Your Future. And then second of all, we also have advocacy efforts that we're doing at the United Nations and, other places. And so if you're interested in taking a more advocacy role and saying, and, ideating on what are some policy initiatives that governments can carry on, can adopt, and other cities can adopt at a more global level, that's another way to get involved, because that's one of our, main goals for this year too, really getting these kinds of opportunities out there to folks that are part of other countries as well, so that they don't there's a way for them to access equitable educational opportunities too.
Okay, and I did have one other question. So it looks like you're mostly based out of UC Berkeley, right? Are they global? Is it just something that anyone can get involved in?
I always refer to UC Berkeley as an example because it's so close to me. I live in the San Francisco area, but we do have chapters across the United States. So California, we have chapters in the East Coast, and so there's there's a variety of ways for folks to get involved. We also work directly with schools sometimes. So rather than having an independent workshop, we have partnered school sites as well where students can go to after school. So for those kinds of information, I would definitely say to reach out to the email address and specify what kind of region you're interested in and what kind of opportunities, and we can connect you with the appropriate team that's part of that area. Now at the moment, because we're still in a pandemic world, all of our programming has actually shifted to an online format. So we have our live instructional, we have an online portal that's has all of our curriculum in a very personalized manner. And so we have programs that are both self-paced and in a more live instructor-led. So in our live instructor-led options, students are able to have those course modules, and along with those course modules, there's weekly interactive sessions of learning where you learn directly from your university professor or your industry expert. And then you work on those practice material to really apply the skills that you just learned, apply the knowledge that you learned towards, practice problems or actual industry level problems. Then we have a more self-paced option where, again, you'll be going through the course modules at your own pace because we want to give that flexibility. But at the same time, you'll have the option to meet with your university professors or industry experts through an option of office hours, which are flexible to your needs. So you can always send a message and say, hey, we want to schedule a time for this timing. And, we'll have our university professor or assigned mentor meet with you at that time to help you out. And so we have these two different options. And in both the options, your assigned section is going to be no more than about 5 individuals. And we do that because we want to make sure it's a very personalized experience for you as you're learning. And the reason is we've seen that when you have classes that are 40 plus students or more, it can become really difficult to manage both the students' learning outcomes, and also the student can feel discouraged and might not want to speak up. You might only see 1 or 2 people raising their hands all the time. And so having just 5 people be part of the cohort is for each section, it ensures that there's enough freedom for everyone to speak, that the instructor can one-on-one touch base with every single person during the section, and there's enough personalized intention to make sure you have 100% no doubts in the material you're learning. So it's really designed to go at your own pace and to make sure with all of our learning checks that yes, you are actually mastering it. And if not, you have that immediate support available to you to clarify any questions before you proceed on to the next module. So that's sort of the setup we have at PUF when it comes to these academies and boot camps.
That's amazing. And this is free?
Yeah, so we have multiple options. So we have free options. We provide scholarships, full scholarships and partial scholarships depending on your needs. And then we also have paid academies. And the reason we asked for payment is to make sure we're able to hire quality university professors and industry experts. So we want to make sure, whoever is part of that instructional team, they're actually devoted 100%. And that's part of making it a more equitable structure, because a lot of times if you have a purely volunteer driven organization, it makes it very difficult for folks to, actually invest 100% of their time to make sure the student is meeting those learning outcomes. So it's only a payment if you have that capacity to do so. Otherwise, we have scholarships that cover your tuition.
Wow, that's an amazing initiative. So thank you so much for sharing. I'm so excited to share this out to everyone else. Do you have any last words for our listeners and viewers?
Yeah, so there's, I'm just so excited for those who are learning. And I think it's a great opportunity for you to, learn more about what UX design is. And I hope, I was able to inspire you to, take that step and take that extra step to learn more and get more involved in your tech community. If you have any questions about what UX design is, how can you use machine learning and artificial intelligence, you can always send me a ping and I'm more than happy to touch base with you and to connect with you.
So how can they connect with you other than through Program Your Future?
Yeah, so I'm happy to provide my email address, and you can also find me on LinkedIn and other places. I'll just share those links with Christine, and you can feel free to add them. But yes, I'm really open to any questions, or if anyone wants any advice on their career journey, their educational journey, definitely reach out to me.
Sounds good, and thank you so much for being a guest on this podcast.
Yeah, thank you, Christine. Have a great day.
You too.